SBC Media.
Welcome to the iGaming Daily Podcast, analysing the news from the betting and gaming industry all over the globe, supported by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market.
On today's episode of iGaming Daily, we are back in the courtroom, this time looking at a multi-jurisdictional battle between MGM and the Federal Trade Commission, where MGM alleges the regulatory oversight group is overstepping its bounds. Meanwhile, another regulatory body has added a new reg that seems squarely aimed at Fanatics Sportsbook. Find out why, coming up next. I'm Jessica Welman, editor of SBC Americas, joined by media manager Charlie Horner for today's episode of iGaming Daily. iGaming Daily is presented by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market. 56% of the EGR Power 50 personalized player experiences with Optimove, and you can join that group. First free month still on offer in the link in the description below, optimove.com/SBC. All right, Charlie, if you can't tell, I'm clicking on all cylinders because it's July 3rd and I'm ready to go enjoy my holiday weekend, but you are getting ready to go enjoy I guess an election. So let's just dive right in. Okay. I believe we discussed the MGM cybersecurity incident last fall at length, right?
Absolutely. Yes. It was a huge story at the time. I think we did multiple episodes on it. We got a guest on to talk about.
Oh, that's right. You had that guest. That was a good one.
Justin Albrecht from Lookout, who spoke about the intricacies and the technical ramifications of a cyber attack. So, yeah, our listeners, if they aren't well versed in this story, then there's plenty in the back catalogue to catch up.
Yeah. So what this has kind of happened recently is the Federal Trade Commission, which is a regulatory oversight group here that generally looks at like banking and those kinds of things, has requested that MGM submit a boatload of paperwork regarding an investigation onto this cyber attack. And the chair of the FTC, Lena Khan, was actually at an MGM property when this whole thing was going down. And since there was, customer financial information on file, it alerted her attention and kind of arguably helped lead to the FTC asking for this. So far, this seems simple enough, but MGM is like, we're not doing this. This is so much paperwork. This is so much information that it would take like hundreds of hours for us to obtain it. And they filed a lawsuit in the DC circuit or district court saying the FTC is kind of overstepping its bounds, that they are not a financial institution. Therefore, they're not covered by the FTC. They've said that Khan should recuse herself because she has, biased information about it. Questions so far on your end about this one?
Yeah, I guess this is, it's quite a coincidence that given that Khan was actually at an MGM property at the time. One question I would have is that MGM has said that Khan should recuse herself from this. Is this something that generally happens if somebody, a body or an organization was personally impacted by an event? Do they usually recuse themselves?
I'm not super familiar with the FTC, but I mean, in general, in courts, in other things, most of the time I see it, it's that you have like a relative that works for, if her husband was like CEO of MGM, there's a conflict of interest there. I think the argument MGM made was that she had kind of sensitive information or outside information that would influence that she's not supposed to have. The FTC is fighting back, by the way. Again, every legal talk, this is where I say, here's a big banner over everything that I am not a lawyer. They filed in a different court. They filed in Nevada, asking the Nevada District Court to compel MGM Resorts to, fill out the dang paperwork. And they have said, really just because she was present doesn't mean that she really has some like extra piece of information or biased piece of information. and they're pushing back that, like, of course she's not going to recuse herself from this. They've also pushed back at the idea that MGM's not a financial institution, making what I think is a reasonably valid point that you extend people lines of credit to gamble, so that qualifies.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, and I guess this is at the core of this legal battle, is whether MGM is a financial institution in the traditional sense of the term. Yeah, I guess this. What do you think?
I mean, I think casinos are subject to all sorts of laws that are related to banking. AML in general, anti-money laundering. I'm pretty sure if you can launder money through it, there's a lot of financial components to a casino. There's a lot of financial transactions, and I think the line of credit is really where I'm on their side, that you are essentially creating a loan for someone. I don't know what else that would make you but a financial institution. I mean, I guess if I loaned you like 20 pounds, that doesn't make me a bank, but
I guess on the scale that MGM is doing it on, at the
greater scale that we're operating it on, it sure seems like that is the way that this works. And I get MGM's side of it too, that it's like, you know, you're asking us to fill out like an exorbitant amount of paperwork and stuff that actually, because we aren't fundamentally a financial institution, we don't have, this isn't just easy for us to find information on.
So at the time, we sort of anticipated that there will be a lot of lawsuits, mainly in the form of sort of class action lawsuits from the victims of this. I guess the people whose information was stolen in the cyber attack. This is slightly different though, and the FTC is asking for all of this paperwork. What sort of information is the FTC looking for MGM to submit?
They're basically looking at, most importantly, how they protect customer information. I think, you know, in the original story that we wrote, we kind of talked about Khan being at the hotel and they were just like taking down people's credit card numbers and manually entering them. And she's like, well, what are you going to do with this afterwards? Is there a protocol in place to make sure that all of this information is being handled sensitively? And that, you know, credit card information, financial information is being properly protected. You were right that there are a lot of class action lawsuits. I think, you know, when I say lawsuit, like the goal of this suit is not money. It's not a criminal conviction. It's to, on MGM's side, try and compel the court to tell the FTC they aren't allowed to do this. And the FTC is telling the court, listen, you have to tell them they have to do this. And this is also just the procedural piece of this. There's this thing in the US, I don't know if you guys have it, called due process, where, you know, you have to go through certain steps. MGM's argument is they don't have due process because they appealed being able to not submit this paperwork. And they were told, like, listen, no matter what kind of appeals you put in, you're going to have to submit it. And they thought that they were not being given an adequate opportunity to argue their side. Meanwhile, the FTC is pointing to the law and saying there's no inciting event, basically, to trigger a lawsuit because the FTC hasn't technically done anything yet. They haven't said, we're going to, you know, put this fine on you or we're going to shut you down or whatever. They are simply saying you need to turn this stuff in. And that's not a substantial enough action for the court to respond to.
Okay. This is becoming a little bit clearer. And I'm guessing our listeners are keeping up.
I'll tell you, I went and bought an LSAT book this week, which is the entry exam you take to go to law school, because I'm just curious at this point, with how many hours I've spent reading court documents, how well I could potentially do.
So not to put you on the spot then after your education, why is one party filing in the DC District Court and then another party filing in Nevada. What's the difference there, and how is it playing out on the state and federal level?
I don't know necessarily why they didn't, MGM didn't file this as a response to the DC case, but they did file separately in Nevada, which is where MGM is headquartered. In that case, MGM has come back and said, you need to either dismiss this or you need to move it over to the DC case because, you know, like jurisdictional preference goes where the issue is litigated first. And their argument is you can't litigate the same case in two separate courts. So you need to either get rid of one or consolidate.
Now, that does make a lot of sense.
It seems reasonable. It certainly makes one less place for us to have to check for information. So we're waiting to see right now what the court's going to say about in Nevada if they're going to move it over. So that's where kind of this stands at the moment. But it seems like neither is willing to back down. So it's kind of rare. You know, we talk about regulators a lot on here, and we know operators are very reticent to be critical of them. So that this is turning into like an all-out court battle is a little surprising. But when I was reading kind of the scope of what they are expected to produce, I can understand why they're like, I'll take some legal fees because this is going to be real complicated to potentially meet the standard of.
Yeah, that does make sense as well. And I guess we're just in this due process part of this at the moment. And we might be moving into speculation here, but say MGM is compelled to hand over this information. What are the potential ramifications if the FTC find any potential wrongdoing? Is there? I mean,
they can fine them. They love a good fine. The FTC. I'm curious too. Just maybe you never know what people are trying to not have out in the open, but if MGM turns all of this information over, you could theoretically have someone request that information through a Freedom of Information Act, and it's now out in the public. So that might be some of the reason, too, why they're less willing to turn things over. But yeah, I would say probably a fine of some sort, which makes sense. Again, I don't know enough about the cybersecurity attack, exactly what was compromised, what was maybe like not up to snuff. So this is a bit out of my purview, to be honest, what the FTC can do, but fine seems like the most obvious thing.
Okay. Yeah.
Speaking of fines and regulations, we're going to take a brief pause. We're going to get out of the courtroom and we're going to look at another regulatory body who has put in a new rule as a result of one sportsbook's actions. Welcome back to iGaming Daily. Charlie, do you remember a few months back, or actually might have been a year at this point, 'cause everything's a blur to me, when Fanatics did that promotion where if you bought merchandise in the Fanatics store, you received a notification that you could get that much in credit on Fanatics Sportsbook?
Yeah, that was an interesting one that definitely caught the headlines, and as we're going to discuss, caught the attention of the regulator.
Well, it did at the time, and I believe they told them to stop. I don't believe that they ever fined them, but they were like, you can't do this, man. In part because it wasn't age gated. People who were 18, 20, not of age, weren't getting these prompts. So this past week, Ohio has actually put the rule in place that you are not allowed to use non-sportsbook promotions in a certain way in the state. It's not quite as prohibitive as it sounds, though.
No, I mean, it kind of makes sense in the fact that if you're offering bonus bets or promo credit, to non-gaming products, you are potentially targeting or inadvertently targeting minors or those who may be on a self-exclusion list of some sort. So I can see why the regulators moved in on this, but maybe it's worth explaining why it's not so prohibitive.
Yeah, so the proposed rule is sports gaming proprietors must not offer a promotion or bonus in connection with or as a result of a non-gaming consumer transaction. The only way that you are allowed to is if you are ensuring that you're not targeting anyone under the age of 21, anyone ineligible to participate in sports gaming. So, athletes themselves, that kind of thing. And individuals with problem gambling are on the self-exclusion list. So in other words, you can do this, but it has to be in a way where you are excluding a lot of different populations. Which is difficult when you're selling sort of sports jerseys online because, 16-year-olds could be purchasing them, people on a self-exclusion list, etc., etc., etc. So you are exposing people who shouldn't be gambling in that instance, but I'm sure there are other product variations that also sort of avoids those groups of people as well. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a question of how easy it is to make sure you're excluding all these populations. It's kind of one of those where in one direction it seems fairly straightforward to be able to do this, and in the other direction it's not. So we've seen sportsbooks partner with and online casinos partner with like hotel loyalty brands and that sort of thing, where you can sync your account and earn hotel rewards and stuff. So it seems like if it's stuff rooted in an account that is a non-gaming reward, it's probably pretty easy to put these rules in place. It's when you flip it around, and if you're, checking into your Hilton's Honors, I don't know how difficult it would be, but I would assume it would be a lot of work to have like push notifications that you can, sync with your BetMGM account or whatever, that adequately exclude all of these people, because how would Hilton know who all of these people are? Yeah, and that's the entire crux of this, I think, is that it's just about operators and advertisers knowing who these people are who are being targeted for sports books. And knowing your customer is so important in this industry, and I don't see why it shouldn't also extend to the marketing side of things as well. And it's probably more effective for the operator as well to effectively target those who are allowed to bet. So it's a win-win. I mean, I'll argue the side of the operators for a second here. We are at the point where the obvious low-hanging fruit customers have been converted. And as you look for opportunities to bring more people in, it's difficult when this way of making your brand aware to other people has been taken away from you. And Fanatics, I think they're a little bit of a different boat in that it's the same company and you probably could sync those databases maybe a little easier. This is where I say I'm not a computer scientist and I don't know, but I think there's still room for them to do things that leverage the apparel side of the industry. Like I said, it's much easier to do like the fan cash, where for every bet you make, you get credit in the store versus the other way around. But, it's got to be a little frustrating for the Fanatics of the world that merch and this tangential business was a big part of the plan. And now you have to augment what you're doing. Yeah, no, I completely understand that point. And it's amplified by the fact that Ohio is an incredibly competitive state. There's a lot of operators in there doing business, and Fanatics are a challenger brand. They're looking to break through into the top few operators. I'm not on the US beat as closely as I used to be, so I'm not entirely sure how they're performing in Ohio.
Meh. But yeah, it's a meh.
That's how I would have sort of perceived it from the outside. So being able to market in this way would be very beneficial. But yeah, they're going to have to find other ways of doing it. Yeah, I mean, this rule isn't hard and steadfast in the rule book yet. There's a public comment period. It ends on the 12th. There's also, like a business impact analysis in there and stuff. But I'm pretty sure this is going to get adopted. I think they probably did speak with Fanatics a bit and other operators about reaching a consensus on this of what is reasonable, so that, again, at least the one direction going out of connecting these things can continue. But regulators continue to add and change rules as they are supposed to. But Ohio, one of those states where it's getting increasingly tricky to operate. All right. I think that I hear fireworks off in the distance. I want a red, white, and blue popsicle. So on this note, Charlie, anything to look at on the websites before we call it a day?
So we've published an interview this week with ELA Games, who are a sort of game provider and game studio, and I was talking to them about one of their latest releases, Cash Crab, which is sort of an arcadey type game, which is the inspiration of it came from an old arcade machine in the back office where the company was formed. So there's a little bit of company history in there. There's a little bit of technical information about the game. So feel free to check that one out. It's on casinobeats.com.
Awesome. You guys check that out. I'm going to literally check out and be back on Monday. So in the meantime, though, the rest of you around the world, we've got more iGaming Daily coming to you to finish out the week, and plenty of news across the SBC network for you to check out and read.
Thank you for listening to today's iGaming Daily podcast, supported by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market. If you want to find out more about some of the subjects raised today, feel free to explore any of the sites in the SBC News network or check out the latest edition of the SBC Leaders magazine. Happy reading.